Channel 5.
Dangerous storms around the world. Inside the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev is swept out of power by harder-line communists. In the United States, a powerful hurricane sweeps the East Coast from the Carolinas to Maine. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. An especially long, dark night in New England and inside the Soviet Union. In Moscow, 10 tanks from an elite Soviet division have rumbled through ramshackle barricades to the Russian parliament. They are trying to bolster Boris Yeltsin's resistance to the coup that threw out Gorbachev. Coup leaders are trying to consolidate power throughout the vast country in hopes of having a new totalitarian center that will hold. Jonathan Sanders reports live from Moscow.
Armored personnel carriers began rolling into Moscow with the Monday morning traffic. The army demonstrating its support for the coup led by hardliners that pushed Soviet President Gorbachev from power. Some tried to stop what to them was an outrageous violation of the Soviet Union's fragile democracy. Rumors of a move against Gorbachev have circulated for months, but they did not prepare the people for today's armored reality. This is terrible, terrible, he said. The men who deposed Gorbachev tried to be matter-of-fact. Gennady Yanayev, Gorbachev's hand-picked vice president, explained the father of perestroika was resting in a clinic near his vacation home in the south. But if they were counting on an easy seizure of power, they forgot about Boris Yeltsin. The president of the Russian Republic climbed onto a tank outside his office building to denounce what he called a reactionary coup. He declared the hardliners' decrees were illegal. Yeltsin called for a general strike. With whatever materials they could scrounge, Muscovites began building barricades around the Russian government building. And they took to the streets, moving to just outside the Kremlin walls, forming their own walls of humanity, trying to stop the army from taking over the city center. Go back, she screams. We are not afraid of you. Look, we are your sons, your grandsons, said this major. We have no orders to fire on you. He waved an empty clip from his pistol to prove it. But the government had its supporters. It's the best thing they've ever done, he said. They should have done it long ago. Toward the end of the day, rallies continued outside Yeltsin's building. But the situation in the capital was far from clear, and many people seemed bewildered by the day's events. Near the Kremlin, lines were drawn, but no one is sure for how long. As night fell, a group of tanks appeared at the Russian parliament, not to besiege it, but to support Yeltsin's call to defend democracy. Much more is known about Moscow than the rest of the country. The official Soviet news media are reporting that the heartland is calm, but reports from the Soviet Baltic republics say the Soviet armed forces are on the move, and leaders there report they are besieged. Dan?
Jonathan, this classic lightning coup came just before Gorbachev was to sign into finality a historic document giving the Soviet republics more power at the expense of the center. Is this a coincidence?
Dan, clearly the proximity of the signing of the Union Treaty is what pushed people to act. We have highly reliable reports that before this event occurred, the Prime Minister, Valentin Pavlov, and another hardliner flew to Mikhail Gorbachev's vacation dacha and demanded that he resign. When Gorbachev refused, Valentin Pavlov told him, "You are going to be sick for a very long time." Dan?
Jonathan Sanders, live in Moscow, thanks. Wyatt Andrews is covering for us at the White House, where President Bush returned today, cutting short his main vacation. Wyatt?
Dan, the president has just concluded a rather lengthy meeting with his top national security advisors and has just issued a statement that can be characterized as a bit more harder on the new Soviet government and a lot more supportive of Boris Yeltsin. Let me refer to it. The United States is now calling for the restoration of the legally elected position of Gorbachev, that is the USSR president, in a statement, Dan, that artfully is worded so as not to demand the restoration of Gorbachev personally. The U.S., according to the president, now opposes the use of force against the Baltics, the president is saying, including elected officials, read Boris Yeltsin. Finally, the president is saying that he is now determined to avoid any actions, quote, that might lend legitimacy to this coup. The president's initial response this morning was muted, based on the hope the coup would fail. He avoided outright condemnation of the coup, but when asked if he supported Yeltsin's call for civil defiance, he signaled yes.
And I think what he's doing is simply expressing the will of the people there to have these reforms and have democracy. I hope that people heed his call.
The president immediately said economic cooperation with the new Soviet government will go on standby.
If we're going to set back democracy, set back reform, obviously, not only the United States, but Europe will put things on hold as well.
The Soviet ambassador made the rounds today, selling the story, not to worry, reform will continue. But that story earned no takers.
They're all very conservative, all of them. And so there isn't any doubt what the character of this action is.
But if no one is fooled, the question then is, why isn't the president being much tougher? Shouldn't he, at a minimum, warn the new government to leave Yeltsin alone?
Any actions involving repression and killing of the people who favor democracy would run the risk of turning the Soviet Union into a pariah state.
One of the White House's great limitations now is that the president knows a lot more about what he wants to avoid than what he wants to do. Beyond the suspension of the economic cooperation with the Soviets, Mr. Bush certainly wants to avoid anything that might suggest a military confrontation, or even any rhetoric that might trigger a Soviet civil war. Dan?
Thanks, Wyatt. Associated Press now reports that President Bush is calling for ousted Mikhail Gorbachev to be returned to power and points out that President Bush is also condemning as misguided and illegitimate the coup. Jim Stewart is live at the Pentagon now with the latest on how U.S. military and intelligence sources see this coup. Jim?
Dan, the Pentagon is tracking two things very closely. One, who now has control of Soviet nuclear forces, and who has the loyalty of the once mighty Red Army. Pentagon officials say there is no sign of any heightened alert by Soviet strategic nuclear forces. Western experts believe they are still under strict control and could only be launched with the consent of 2 or more members of the ruling council. The 4 million strong Red Army is another question.
Our information is still very limited for outlying areas, but at this point we have no reports of the large-scale use of troops and tanks outside of Moscow.
The troops inside Moscow are from the Interior Ministry, the same hardcore units that routed protesters in the Baltics. CBS News has learned that Soviet Defense Minister Dmitry Yazov, who supports the takeover, was in the Crimea where Gorbachev was vacationing when the takeover occurred, and may in fact have informed Gorbachev of his ouster. Another key question, where does Chief of the Soviet General Staff M.A. Mosayev fit in? Seen here with his counterpart, General Colin Powell, 2 weeks ago, Mosayev was on vacation and out of Moscow at the time of the coup. All of this raises the question of how much did U.S. intelligence know? The tea leaf readers over here now are saying, well, yes, there were signs, but no, they didn't know exactly when. They, in fact, were as much caught off guard as Mikhail Gorbachev. Dan?
Thanks, Jim Stewart at the Pentagon. Now the other big story we're following tonight, the massive hurricane that swept up the east coast of the USA and is now pounding Portland, Maine. Here's the latest from Bob Sheets, director of the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida. Bob?
Well, Dan, it has moved inland, as you've indicated there, across New England, and is now losing its punch. It's centered up there near Portland, Maine, and we think that most of the area has now seen the worst of this hurricane.
Bob Sheets, live at the Hurricane Center in Miami. The hurricane formed off the Bahamas last week, brushed Cape Hatteras, North Carolina overnight, then roared up the eastern seaboard to New England. CBS News correspondent Harold Dow is standing by. If we can bring him up live in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Harold, are you there?
Yes, I am, Dan. This storm came through here with a lot of fury, and as you know, there was a lot of damage. We've got some yachts and some sailboats that have come aground, and people are just trying to cope right now. This is, of course, the tail end of the storm, and things are a lot calmer than they were earlier today. Crawling up the northeast coast, Hurricane Bob looked like a bowling ball grooved down a polished lane. Its track was precise, narrow, and powerful. But even though the surprisingly early storm carried wind gusts of more than 130 miles an hour, authorities say there was relatively little serious damage. Coastal sections of Long Island, Rhode Island, and Connecticut were battered with high winds, flooding, and sheets of driving rain. But aside from some downed tree limbs, the major consequence of Hurricane Bob was electricity. Hundreds of thousands of residents in several states were without power for most of the day. Forecasters said one of the reasons for the storm's slight impact was preparations well ahead of time. Early this morning, thousands of New Englanders began scrambling, trying to leave before Hurricane Bob arrived. Traffic on the 2 bridges leading out of Cape Cod was backed up for miles. The winds ultimately became too strong, and officials were forced to close both bridges down. Those who were trapped had to seek shelter in colleges and hospitals on the Cape. Hurricane Bob even reached as far north as Kennebunkport, Maine, where President Bush had been vacationing until today. Dan, the people who live in the New England states were expecting the worst, but now it seems they may have survived the fury of Hurricane Bob.
Harold Dow, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, more about the Soviet coup, including how it might affect the hostages in Lebanon and Saddam Hussein.
When sore muscles or minor arthritis pain hold you back, you need strong medicine. Ben Gay with not just 1 but 2 pain relievers. Warming power for fast relief. Helps get you going again. Ben Gay, fast, strong medicine for pain relief.
Red Lobster announces 6 great new trios with all the tastes you love, like large butterfly shrimp.
Terrific.
Try it on our Atlantic Trio, just $6.99.
$6.99?
For a limited time, only at Red Lobster.
Now, Red Lobster's lunch menu is available Sunday, too. So many great dishes to choose from for so little. Most lunches $4.99 or less. All week at Red Lobster for lunch. Now served Sunday, too.
Now's the time for Centrum Silver, because you're over 50 and you're out there swinging. Centrum Silver, a complete vitamin formula for your changing nutritional needs. Centrum Silver, it's a great time to be silver.
If the Kremlin coup sticks, it could affect events in the Middle East, of course, including the timetable for Middle East peace talks and the fate of Western hostages in Lebanon. For more on that, we go to CBS News correspondent Bob Simon reporting live in Tel Aviv. Bob, good evening.
Dan, everything gets put on hold in the Middle East. A peace conference, a hostage release, everything. That was the most common crystal ball view here tonight, that whenever talk of peace seems around the corner in these parts, something gets in the way.
The only cheers came from the regimes that lost the last war. Radio Baghdad welcomed the ouster. Palestine radio said the Soviet Union would no longer be a silent witness to American domination of the region. Syria's President Assad met Jordan's King Hussein today to discuss the peace conference scheduled for October. But observers thought the Syrians will want to delay now to try to get a better starting position from a hard-aligned Soviet regime, one which might not march in step with the Americans.
It's hard to envisage a new Soviet foreign minister following the American line, going to Damascus, going to Tunis to the PLO, in effect saying, do what the Americans are asking, this is in your best interest.
One of Israel's conditions for attending a peace conference was a restoration of full diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union. Experts thought this would not be high on the new Soviet agenda. But Israel's prime concern tonight, as a new batch of Soviet immigrants landed in Tel Aviv, was whether Moscow would permit the exodus to continue.
Freedom for the hostages also seemed further off tonight. Prospects for their release seemed bright yesterday when it looked like they might be able to slip through new openings created by a global shift of power. But then the world shifted again, or so it seemed, suddenly this morning. Dan?
Thanks, Bob. The coup in the Kremlin is having repercussions around the world. Oil and gold prices surge. Stocks tumble. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed down nearly 70 points. In the trying to be breakaway Baltic states, a reported Soviet crackdown. The Soviet military commander declared himself ruler of all 3 Baltic republics. In Brussels, the NATO military alliance met to assess the crisis. Calming some nerves, the commander of 270,000 Soviet troops still in Germany said their pullout will continue as scheduled. Former Soviet satellites in Eastern Europe called emergency cabinet meetings, and Czechoslovakia tightened security along its border with the Soviet Union. Here in the United States, immigrants from the Soviet Union reacted to today's news from Moscow with worry and sorrow. Frank Courier has their story.
President Bush calls the coup.
They squeezed today inside a tiny southwest side Chicago card shop. Lithuanian Americans eager for headlines from home.
It's the worst possible thing that could happen to the whole world.
So stunned by the hardliners' coup, these immigrant families and their children are among 100,000 transplanted Lithuanians living in Chicago. It's the largest community outside their Soviet Baltic homeland, which for the past 17 months has enjoyed freedom from Moscow.
Everything that has been accomplished so far might go down the drain.
That's what worries Teresa Podgorski, who makes dumplings at the neighborhood Tallman Deli. Without an uprising, workers here think Gorbachev's ouster means the country will self-destruct.
When you talk about KGB and all that, this is it. That's what people, they're doomed again.
For many immigrants here, the Kremlin shakeup brings back haunting memories of World War II, when as teenagers they escaped death at the hands of Soviet troops and deportations to Siberia. Twice this year, Chicago's Lithuanians rallied, first in protest to last January's deadly occupation of the capital, Vilnius, then last May in support of the republic's newly elected Democratic president who visited Chicago.
I wouldn't put it past the KGB.
Today, as messages faxed from Vilnius to Chicago confirmed more bad news, there was resignation among those who had been there before.
The past is coming back again, and it worries us all.
While spirits are strong in this most Soviet of American neighborhoods, the mood is grim, said one observer. We've all today been set back 50 years. Frank Courier, CBS News, Chicago.
Stay with CBS News now for more news, including a look at what Gorbachev accomplished and the dangers ahead.
Here's coffee. You know, my decaffeinated is darker than yours.
You wake up perkier and your newspaper's more in-depth.
Wait. I'll do it again. Here's your brand. My Folgers Crystals. Mountain grown. I'm filling. I'm pouring. I'm darker.
Okay. Can I have a taste?
Sure. Decaffeinated Folgers Crystals. So dark and rich. Shouldn't you switch?
You know, your decaffeinated is darker than mine.
Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat Bran. So crunchy, sweet, and irresistible, it's gotten you in trouble again.
Is that the last of the Cracklin' Oat Bran?
What should you do?
Is that the last of the Cracklin' Oat Bran? Is that the last of the Cracklin' Oat Bran?
With the crunchy, sweet taste of Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat Bran, an open box is an empty box.
This is the sound of Unisom, the sound of sleep. With Unisom, you hit your pillow and fall asleep fast. Tonight, you can sleep more soundly with Unisom, America's #1 sleep aid.
A lot of you insist on eating wheat thins and oat thins because they taste good. But the whole idea behind these crackers is that you can eat them without feeling guilty. That's why they're baked, not fried. I mean, eat them because they're delicious, and you miss the whole point.
Adoption, a desperate journey into a buried past.
Who are you?
A search that may bring happiness or heartbreak. Family Secret, 48 Hours, Wednesday.
Although Mikhail Gorbachev was, for the Soviets, a whole new thing in history, he was more successful at selling himself and his policies abroad than at home to the people who lived the consequences of his rule. Richard Threlkeld looks at how Gorbachev rose to power and why he lost it.
He's been just as revolutionary as Lenin, but a revolution without bullets, Gorbachev called it. His weapons were perestroika, overhauling the economy, and glasnost, letting some fresh air into a closed society. All of a sudden, Soviets found they could vote their choice in really free elections.
Better future, not communist.
Worship as they wished, say whatever they pleased, get the real news instead of propaganda. He stopped a nasty, festering war in Afghanistan and won the Nobel Peace Prize along the way.
I want to say hello to you.
In the West, they called him Gorby. We can do business with this man, said Margaret Thatcher. And for 6 years, the West did just that, not least of all Ronald Reagan.
You still think you're in an evil empire, Mr. President?
He put a stop to 45 years of Cold War. Just last month, he and President Bush finally signed the START Treaty to start dismantling their nuclear arsenals. And he rolled up the Iron Curtain. In Berlin and Warsaw and Prague, people went their own way because he let them go. They haven't called him Gorby at home, though. They blamed him when there was no food in the food stores, no vodka in the liquor shops. They blamed him when there was bloodshed in the provinces. The country was coming apart, they said. His allies began to fall away. Yeltsin turned into a rival who said Gorbachev wasn't going far enough, fast enough. Now he is out of power and out of sight. But if he could speak to his countrymen of the uncertain, difficult days ahead, perhaps he would read them what he wrote 4 years ago. It is possible to suppress, to compel, to bribe or break or blast, but only for a certain period. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, New York.
Joining me now is our CBS News consultant on Soviet affairs, Princeton University professor, and our friend Steve Cohen. Steve, what about the argument? Listen, this is what the Russians do when they change power. They've been doing it since the Tsars. It's just another change of government.
Everything we know about this country today tells us that this is a country profoundly divided between the friends and foes of change, between Democrats and anti-Democrats, between reformers and conservatives. The forces that move today are the enemies of reform.
If the leaders of the country can make it stick, what is it that they want?
Well, what they don't want is what Gorbachev made the driving force of his bloodless revolution, democratization. For the first time in Russian history, not just Soviet, but Russian history, a Soviet leader crossed the Rubicon from authoritarianism to democracy. And to these people who took power today, it seemed he was destroying the central state. They want to restore the power of that state, but they want a healthy economy. I guess they want a Chinese model, economic reform without democracy.
Is this their Tiananmen Square?
Well, so far, not too much blood has been shed, at least in Moscow. There are reports coming in of resistance in Leningrad. This story is not over. The resistance goes on. It's far too early to tell whether there'll be strong resistance and whether these people are prepared to pull the trigger if there is.
Any way that Gorbachev might yet come back?
The evidence suggests that the people who took power are trying to get him to give his blessings to the very overthrow of him. I don't think there's anything in his biography that suggests he will do it. Yeltsin has said that Gorbachev has to be restored to the presidency, that's the Constitution. Therefore, the fate of Gorbachev depends on the fate of the resistance.
And Yeltsin.
And Yeltsin.
Steve Cohen, thanks. When we come back, an update on what's happening now with the Soviet coup and an update on the destruction from the hurricane.
Ask Angela Lansbury about aspirin-free Bufferin AF Nighttime.
Angela, there's something new here. Bufferin AF Nighttime?
Yes, it's from the makers of Bufferin, for when you feel achy at night and you're having trouble getting to sleep.
It's for both problems?
Uh-huh. Bufferin AF Nighttime should really help. You see, it's a maximum strength aspirin-free pain reliever plus a gentle non-prescription ingredient to help you get to sleep.
New Bufferin AF Nighttime helps put pain and you to sleep.
Evidently, some people have money to burn. Why else would they pay an outrageous fee to carry a simple credit card when they could carry the Discover card, the card that charges no annual fee, yet pays cash back on every charge, which means it puts money into your pocket instead of burning a hole in it. It pays to Discover.
Presenting the Gripper Zipper from Ziploc. Now the easiest closing bag there is. In fact, even the little ones can close it. Hello.
Feel the zipper. It's locking. Feel it close the first time, every time.
Ziploc bags.
With the Gripper Zipper.
If your doctor has recommended Metamucil and you like the results, but you don't like those glasses of thick liquid, change to FiberCon. Get the same fiber action in easy-to-swallow tablets. Get doctor-recommended FiberCon.
I'm Harry Smith. Coup at the Kremlin. Is hope for democracy dead in the Soviet Union? Join us for continuing coverage tomorrow on CBS This Morning.
Updating you now on the two major stories we're covering tonight. The State Department has just advised Americans not to travel to the Soviet Union for the time being. This follows the coup that overthrew Mikhail Gorbachev. Harder-line communists installed Gorbachev's vice president, Gennady Yanayev, as acting president. In the streets of Moscow, reminders of Beijing's Tiananmen Square as demonstrators defied army tanks. Russia's Boris Yeltsin called for a general protest strike. At least 10 army tanks rallied to Yeltsin's cause. Situation in the rest of the country not really known. President Bush refuses to recognize the new coup as a government. He calls for Gorbachev to be restored to power. Now, about the hurricane. It's diminishing, not as strong as it once was. Top winds have dropped to 75 miles an hour as it moves into the area around Portland, Maine. Earlier, the hurricane battered New York's Long Island, the tip, and southern Rhode Island. It hit Massachusetts hard, toppling trees and power lines, leaving hundreds of thousands without electricity in its wake. The hurricane is expected to continue to weaken as it heads into Maine and eastern Canada. Stay with this CBS station for continuing coverage of the hurricane and the Soviet coup. Please note, we'll be back on the air immediately with any major developments, and we will have a special program on both stories right after your late local news tonight. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. We'll see you again soon.
If you're looking to maintain regularity, look here. There's a drug-free way to do it, and Kellogg's All Bran can be an important part, because a high-fiber diet, including Kellogg's All Bran, can give you the fiber you need to help stay regular, drug-free. And All Bran goes a lot better with berries. A high-fiber diet and Kellogg's All Bran for drug-free regularity.
Hi. I bet you've got some leading American slices handy. We'll go get them and bring some cheddar, too, because you're going to do your own taste test. We're going to find out what makes this American deluxe. Oh, good, you're back. Now, that was quick. Put the cheddar together with your American slice. That's right. Now, take a bite. Now you have an idea what makes deluxe deluxe. More cheddar. That's right. More cheddar makes it better. More cheddar makes it deluxe.
Originally, I was taking aspirin for my headaches. Aspirin would sometimes irritate my stomach, and I called the doctor, and he told me to try Tylenol. It wouldn't cause the stomach irritation that aspirin can. Tylenol really worked for me. It got rid of my headaches. I didn't have any problems after I took Tylenol.
Lana Carson trusts Tylenol. Its pain reliever is in a class by itself.
It's a wonderful pain reliever for me, and it works great.
I knew something must be wrong. I was getting these sharp pains, and sometimes pressure and bloating. I'm glad I asked my doctor. He said it was gas, and recommended Mylicon.
Mylanta's Mylicon Gas. It has the best medicine for gas.
Here's news. If your athlete's foot won't go away, you could have more than athlete's foot. You could have a secondary yeast infection. That's right, yeast.
Only Mycotin cures both athlete's foot and secondary yeast infections with Myconazole. Step up to the mic. Mycotin.
This is CBS.